So let's see what the news has in store for us this week. As always, we go to our AI and we'll see what they have to give us for the news over the last 7 days. And as always, we exclude not social media. We exclude mainstream media. So this is Copilot. We always go with Copilot first. Copilot is owned by Microsoft. So Copilot, show me the top UK news stories for the past 7 days. Exclude mainstream media. So the top independent UK news stories. Far-right violence and anti-immigration riots escalate. Independent reporting highlights a surge in coordinated far-right attacks, including hotel arson attempts, targeting asylum seekers and violent unrest in Plymouth and other coastal towns. I have seen quite a bit of this, actually, when I've been on social media. There's various people that are going around and making videos where they're attempting to gain entry into what is effectively, or was effectively, private property, public property. So like hotels, things like that, trying to get entry into a hotel and being stopped at the door and being forcibly restrained to not enter the building and being told that they're not allowed in. And that is because these hotels have now been designated asylum seeker hotels, effectively. So when asylum seekers come to our country, the government pick them up and they place them into various hotels all over the country, depending on where they're available. And this has brought quite a lot of backlash and quite a lot of uproar from the general public, especially in the areas where the hotels are. But I think the ones that I saw was a group that are quite organised, and it's not just in their area that they're going around. I think they've been posting across the country about different things that have been happening in these hotels in various locations, so not just where they live. So it says far-right violence. I'm really hesitant to do the right and left thing, because I think all the time that we try and place a blame on a faction like that, we're missing the overall point, because government would love for us to just be arguing across the left, across the right at each other, whereas effectively we should be arguing at government about why these things are happening. So I don't believe it's a far right or a far left issue. I think it's an everybody issue. And you know my stance on immigration. You know my stance on why asylum seekers would want to come to our country, and the possibility that if our governments weren't interfering in their country, we wouldn't have this problem. So this is more an attempt to try and keep your attention on the things that are happening here, which is important, don't get me wrong, but is detracting attention from the reason that these people are here. And in order to provide a solution to the problem, you have to look at what the problem is and where it originates from, in my view. But it doesn't surprise me, because I have seen a lot of that over social media this week. Internal turmoil within Labour over blocked candidacies. Independent political journalists covered the backlash after Keir Starmer blocked Andy Burnham's attempt to return to Parliament, sparking internal conflict and public criticism. I must admit, I have seen something about this. I haven't taken much. I just haven't paid much attention to it, because it's just backbitey fighting when it comes to governance of our country. And they're not doing a very good job as it is. Flood alerts and severe weather warnings across the UK. We've had this for the past few weeks. Non-mainstream outlets reported on nearly 150 flood alerts issued nationwide, with heavy downpours and travel disruption affecting multiple regions. Well, we're in January. It's still classed as winter. And January, February tend to get quite a lot of rain. So I would hazard a guess that it's not outlandishly more rain than we would normally have. You just wait for it, because in the summer it's going to be, oh, we've got drought. Okay, grassroots Palestine action protests lead to mass arrests. Now, I did see this. Independent reporters covered the arrest of 86 activists protesting outside a prison in support of Palestine action, a story largely underreported by major outlets. Now, I saw the reporting on social media, so alternative outlets, and a lot of the backlash was over the sensationalized headlines again, where the mainstream media tried to make it out that these 86 activists had forced their way in to a prison. They had forced their way into a prison, and not just forced their way through the gates, but forced their way into the building. And when you see the video taken by the activists themselves, it's a peaceful protest on behalf of the one remaining person who is still on hunger strike after all this time and is in desperate need of the government's attention. And the government is completely doing their la la la, I'm not listening fingers. So it was a peaceful protest. The gates were open to the prison, so they didn't force their way in at all. The gates were open. They walked through the gates peacefully, holding their placards and their billboards. And the door to the prison, which would be the outer door, it's not like any inner doors, the door to the prison was open. And the protesters very quietly went in through the door with their placards to make their statement. And it all got reported as if they had stormed the prison. The headlines were outlandishly bad. But that's mainstream media for you. We know not to trust them. So good on them. Good on them for keeping up the noise around the fact that the government is still not taking any notice of protests from the hunger striker, the one remaining hunger striker. And all he's asking for is to have his mail. He's been on remand for as long as all the others, and all he's asking for is his mail. And they're refusing him. Because he's being held under the Terrorism Act, he can be held as long as they deem necessary. And their court case is not coming up to be heard, they're on remand, so this is the very first stage. They're not even due to come into court, I don't think, until mid this year. And they've already been held for 14 months. And they're not getting their post, nothing. AI-driven policing reforms raise civil liberties concerns. Oh, yes. Independent journalists examined the UK's planned expansion of AI and facial recognition policing tools, questioning oversight and potential misuse. Now, we've done the digital ID coverage. The very first one was about digital ID and what it means for us, and the fact that they've taken out the compulsory aspect, but they're now trying to bring it in through the back door. This week's one that went up was more along, it gave you a little bit more about the digital ID and explaining why digital ID is coming into place, but also it covered the facial recognition and the argument that we need to get it stopped, and that there's a consultation going on at the Home Office level, and for you to be able to have your say. If you haven't seen that video, go and look at it on my YouTube feed. It's the digital ID part 2, and it shows you there where you can have your say against facial recognition. Now, having your say is through the Big Brother Watch campaign, and they have put together a web page where you can go and you can sign up and you can send a letter to the Home Office before the 12th of February, and you can have your say, basically to say, we do not want facial recognition technology in our streets, in our towns, and in our cities, and you can have your say. That stops on the 12th. I'm sure it's the 12th of February, and then they're in consultation. Now, the lady that is overseeing the police at the moment, and that all of this is being aimed at, and I can't remember her name. She's got a Miss Mahmood. Is it Shabana Mahmood? Something like that. She was in the Houses of Parliament saying that they're going to be throwing a ton more money at facial recognition software and technology, and that it's going to be rolled out to help the police all over the country. And she's saying that in the House of Commons before it's even gone through the Home Office consultation phase. So there's been absolute uproar about that, and rightly so. Rightly so. It's like jumping the gun as far as I'm concerned. She's laid out her intention, and she's effectively said that every single person will be tracked. Every single person will be identifiable by facial recognition technology in every single town and every single city by the time she's finished. And she's using it as a great way to alleviate pressure on the police. I think a great way to alleviate pressure on the police is to give them more funding to get more police, not to basically cattle us individual citizens. So it makes it like we're in a dystopian reality, which is what they want. Don't forget all the digital ID stuff that we've spoken about, and how they just want you to comply. But this goes against our civil liberties, and a lot of independent people are really speaking out about it. And I'm doing a lot of research on it at the moment, and I'm bringing that to you every week as I get it. Okay. Cost of living and housing pressures highlighted through local investigations. Independent local news covered issues such as supermarket waste scandals, eviction threats to small businesses, and the fallout from a 500-year-old oak tree being felled by a corporate landlord. Now, I haven't heard anything about this. Okay, so supermarket waste scandals. From what I was aware and what my understanding was, that a lot of the supermarkets had cut down on their waste by effectively on-date products going to food banks and places in need. So I'm not really sure if that's rearing its head again. Eviction threats to small businesses, I haven't heard very much, but that's got to be a very concerning thing for the small businesses, and also for the people that use those small businesses. So from a health and wellbeing point of view, it's awful. But it might not be something that I go deeply research-wise into. Okay, UK political realignment. Reform UK gains more conservative defectors. We had this last week, and I did say that a lot of the memes I'm seeing is the fact that the Reform UK party is now effectively it's the Conservatives 2.0, because the Conservatives have defected. They're obviously not happy with Badenoch. Smaller outlets tracked the growing number of Tory MPs defecting to Reform UK, noting the party's rising influence outside mainstream coverage. We all know it doesn't matter who you vote for. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's in power, because they are not the people that make the decisions. It's the global puppet masters that make the decisions, and the puppeticians do as they're told. They can stand there and give you loads of guff about what they intend to do and how they intend to do it. But we all know when they get in, they'll go, oh, well, we inherited this from the past administration, and, we're unable to change this, and it's much more difficult than we thought. And Yeah, but we know in our hearts that they're not the ones that make the calls. They're not the ones that make all of the decisions when it comes to our country. That's to the global elites. And our politicians at this exact moment in time, it doesn't matter who they are, they have to kowtow to the global. Okay, so that was Microsoft. I sounded very pessimistic then, didn't I? Yeah. Okay. Well, that was Microsoft. It was Copilot. And even though I asked them, I mean, they're using the independent. I don't know whether you class that as non-mainstream. Possibly, I don't know. But everything's come from the independent. Okay, let's ask Claude exactly the same question. Political Reform UK focus. Nigel Farage crypto connections. Byline Times revealed that Nigel Farage received payment from David Bailey, a cryptocurrency advisor to Donald Trump, who worked with Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign chair, jailed for financial crimes related to Kremlin-aligned influence operations. Ooh, I wonder how all the new Tory people in the Reform Party feel about that. Okay, crypto connections. EU's Farage clause. Reports suggested the EU is seeking a provision in Brexit reset negotiations that would force Britain to pay compensation if a future UK government reneges on any deal struck by Keir Starmer. The general consensus is that on social media that Keir Starmer is trying to get us back in to the EU. And I don't think that's off of any consultation with the general public. I don't think that's something that we have discussed and said we wanted. So I'm unsure where that's coming from, but he seems to be taking it upon himself to do these things without consulting anybody. But then Keir Starmer appears to be a law all unto himself. So I'm really unsure what that means. But a Farage clause, interesting that they've used Mr. Farage's name. Maybe Farage means something else. I'll have to look it up. Reform UK's corporate lobbying. Open Democracy exposed how Reform UK Deputy Leader Richard Tice, might be Tice, has been holding regular breakfast meetings with big businesses and lobbying firms, asking companies to develop the party's future manifesto in 3-page policy submissions. It's not going well for Reform at the moment, is it? There's been a lot of alternative media reporting on Reform, so that's not so good. Reform Council scandals. Oh, poor Reform. Byline Times reported that Reform chairman Paul Donaghy had at least 10 companies struck off by Companies House for failing to submit legally required documents. Well, I don't know why that would be a bad thing. Surely the companies have to provide the documentation. So if they haven't provided it, then maybe they've been warned and told they must provide it and they still haven't provided it, and that's why they've been struck off. Who knows? Labour. So off of Reform into Labour. Labour government coverage. Labour polling crisis. Our politics is not good in this country. Novara Media reported on Labour dropping below the Tories in new polling, with analysis of Keir Starmer's difficult 2025. Keir Starmer has had a very difficult 2025. But if he wasn't so absolutely useless, then he may well not have had such a difficult 2025. And I don't think his start to 2026 is going very well either. Okay, doctor strikes. Novara covered Starmer calling doctor strikes utterly irresponsible amid ongoing National Health Service disputes. To become a doctor, you really have to be quite dedicated to a few different things. You have to have a love of medicine, but you also have to have a love of helping people and working with patients. Otherwise, you wouldn't go into that field because it's a very long process to become a doctor. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through. There are a lot of qualifications that you need to gain in order to become a doctor. So I was hazard a guess that if the doctors are on strike, it's because of conditions being appalling. And if conditions are appalling for doctors in the National Health Service, that would be down to government funding or government remit or government constraints. So calling them utterly irresponsible, as far as I'm concerned, no, it's not utterly irresponsible. If they're going out on strike, there will be a reason for that. And I'll look into that and see what they're on strike about. Okay, international and foreign policy. Venezuela coverage. Alternative outlets extensively covered Donald Trump's actions against Venezuela, with Byline Times reporting on how this opens doors for big tech oligarchs' plans for an anti-democratic network state. Well, that's interesting because the governance of Venezuela hasn't changed. They decided that they were going to go and arrest Maduro, and his deputy has stepped in, and she's not complying. She's not being bought by any of the United States. She's not interested. So they can think about big tech oligarchs as much as they like, but I think she's quite resistant to that. So, yeah. US-Russia alignment. Peter Jukes at Byline Times argued that recent State Department decisions show the US is now more aligned with Russia than Europe. I think Trump's got the hump with Europe. They're not kowtowing to him as much as he would like. I really don't know if I would go so far as to say that he's more aligned with Russia, though, because I think Russia isn't kowtowing to the United States either. I think Russia has just about had it, especially with this Board of Peace thing going on. They've made their standpoint on that really pretty clear, and I think it's fabulous. They've turned around and said before they'll even consider the documentation that's been presented to them, and bearing in mind Trump wants $1 billion, not a trillion, $1 billion. Oh, is it? Oh no, it might be $1 trillion. I'm going to have to look it up. But he wants a huge amount of money from each country that's part of the Board of Peace. So he's invited Russia, and Russia have turned around and said, well, you can take that money out of the frozen assets that you have that belong to us if we decide to join. So therefore, Russia's not actually giving them any money. They're just giving Trump the permission to use some of the money that the United States have frozen from Russia. And Putin has also said that in order for anything to move forward in Palestine, the Palestinian people need to be part of the decision. And I think that all of the countries should have made that plea, because I think that's right. How can you have a Board of Peace in a country where none of the countrymen of that country are part of the Board of Peace? Technology and social media. Here we go. Deep fake concerns. The Prime Minister's spokesman told Byline Times that X's creation of sexual deepfakes was completely unacceptable, but didn't commit to direct action against the company. From what I know, X has changed and altered its provisions of what it can show you and do in alignment with UK policy now. So I think that might be why they've held off a little bit. I'm not so sure that all of these headlines are just from the last 7 days, though. That is what I asked Claude. But when we look, even though he says from the past 7 days, some of these are things that we've covered before. Okay. So that was Claude. Now we have Grok. And you may well notice that I'm not half as enthusiastic about Grok as I usually am. Usually I'm very, we love Grok. We love Grok because it's very honest and it tells us as it is. We have some breaking news on that. Okay. Reform UK's pledge on veterans and Northern Ireland legacy issues. Nigel Farage and Reform UK announced plans for a future government to grant immunity from prosecution for armed forces in combat. only with Defence Secretary approval. Halt ongoing prosecutions, pardon convicted veterans from historic operations, leave the ECHR and withdraw from ICC jurisdiction. This sparked heated debate, with critics accusing it of shielding potential war crimes in Northern Ireland, while supporters framed it as protecting soldiers from witch hunts. Ian Duncan Smith defended past Conservative efforts on the issue and called Reform's claims defamatory. Well, we know, I'm not sure if you do know, the history of Ireland and our involvement with Ireland. We can do a dive into that because as a nation, Ireland and our occupation of that tiny part is absolutely outlandishly bad. The history that surrounds it, and I would hazard a guess that there's an argument that a lot of the people that were involved, a lot of the military people that were involved, should be held accountable for the atrocities that occurred. But I'll look into it and I'll have a see. Okay. Well, we've covered child poverty. I've done research hubs on child poverty. If you're interested in the child poverty research that I've done, you can find that on YouTube. Child poverty rates and Scottish child payment success. Reports highlighted Scotland having the UK's lowest child poverty rate at 23% versus 31% in England, Wales, and 24% in Northern Ireland. Attributed partly to the Scottish child payment, £27.15 weekly. Independent supporters use this to argue Scotland outperforms our UK and should aim to match independent nations like Norway, minus 12%, or Ireland, minus 15%, rather than just UK averages. Well, it would be interesting if our government actually took a look at what Scotland's doing. I mean, the extra £27.50 for a family that's struggling, that's a lot of money. We know that they've lifted the 2-child cap on the benefits, but they haven't lifted the benefit cap on the benefits in the UK. But it's nice to know that Scotland's doing something to really, really sort out a big, big problem. We've spoken before about how I firmly believe that children, as our future, need to be born into some form of assured, not financial status, but just not be placed into a position where they're fearful and scared from the time they're born, because their parents are fearful and scared. They're not going to be able to feed them. They're not going to be able to clothe them. And with 31% of our children in the UK living in that condition, it doesn't bode well for the beginning of life. Live export ban for livestock, GB wide. A ban on live animal exports for slaughter, fattening was welcomed as a win for animal welfare after years of campaigning. Note, it applies to Great Britain, but not Northern Ireland, due to differing EU-aligned rules, leading to some criticism of incomplete UK coverage. Okay. Criticism of grooming gang inquiries and related scandals. Well, we already found out through the DSMA scandal that a lot of the grooming gang stuff and the utilising children for not great means had been hidden because of the political involvement in those scandals. So discussions around alleged failures in addressing grooming gangs, including government U-turns on inquiries, Pride event officials facing child abuse charges and convictions, and broader concerns over policing priorities, e.g. two-tier policing claims from past riots or football matches. Well, all of that, I think, will be coming out over time. It's going to take time. But the population, the general population, are absolutely pig sick of all this grooming gang stuff. So we'll look into it. Debates on UK fragmentation and nationalism. Comments from Welsh Labour's Eluned Morgan. I apologise if I'm completely butchering that name. Eluned Morgan, warning that nationalist wins in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland could fragment the UK, countered by pro-independence voices mocking the idea and pointing to successful small nations outperforming Wales and the UK. Well, yeah, if the cap fits. Other circulating claims and critiques. Accusations of civil service bias against potential reform governments, threats to block policies or quit. Concerns over immigration, DEI in policing, alleged allowance of criminals as officers, and security risks. UAE restricting student support over radicalisation fears. We had that last week. Broader anti-Labour list citing scandals like donor issues, tax U-turns, prisoner releases, farmer protests over inheritance tax, and economic pressure, high energy costs from net zero policies. So that was the news from Microsoft Copilot, from Claude, which is independently run, and from Grok, which belongs to X. And at the beginning of the Grok, I did say that I was less impressed with Grok because we have found out that Elon Musk has altered the algorithms for Grok. And he's altered the algorithms to not, on X, to not show, it's not to not show. I suppose the best way to put it is when it comes to X, which Grok belongs to, Elon Musk has altered the algorithms to suppress certain information. So he's not taking things down. He's just not showing you things that might be detrimental to the establishment and the establishment's allies. So if you post something on X now and you mention the establishment or one of the establishment's allies that you don't agree with and you're quite vehement and you post that post could be suppressed by sometimes like 90%. So if you've got 100 people that are following you on X, only 10 people might be able to see it. And that's only if they're paying attention at the time that you post it. If they're not on when you post it, it will be on their feed, but they won't see it because it will be much further down on their feed. So Elon Musk has taken it upon himself to suppress free speech on X, which has gone down really badly. And we will be talking a little bit more about that in our research section. But because of that, I kind of feel now that we can't really trust 100% what Grok is showing us, because Grok is part of X and Grok was designed by Elon Musk, who has put the suppressions in place. So I thought to myself, I like having 3 different AI because they do tend to give us different perspectives and different viewpoints. And Grok has given us different things to Claude and to Copilot. But I've come across a new AI and I'll be testing it out tonight for the very first time. So bear with me if it all goes bad. This is uncensored AI. I suppose the clue is in the name. I'm looking into who owns it at the moment. From what I can see, it was a crowd-funded effort somewhere in America, a young man and 2 young men. And it appears that they seem to be bona fide. So we'll see. So I'm going to ask them exactly the same question. And like I say, I've not done any searches on this yet, so this will be reasonably interesting to see what it comes up with and what it's capable of showing me. I mean, it might be that it's only in America. Oh no. Okay. Now we have 7 different things, and none of them look like they're anything to do with what we've already read. Rothschild Island controversy. A recent leak revealed Rothschild Island in Antarctica was declared off limits in 1959. The treaty bans unauthorized personnel and has sparked speculation about the island's purpose. Okay. Okay. I did ask about the UK. Yeah, I did. So I wonder why it's giving us that. I wonder where that island is. Antarctica. I'll look it up on a map and see. But it does beg the question, why would it be declared off limits? I think we might have to do a bit of a dig on that. Nothing on either of the other AIs. Okay. So that must have come up in the news at some point. Somalian daycare fraud in Minnesota. Well, this isn't in the UK. An investigation found Somalian-run daycares in Minnesota were receiving millions in government funds despite no actual children enrolled. The money was laundered to Somalian politicians and terrorists. Oh, okay. Again, not in the UK, so it's not really done what I asked it to do. And the Somalian daycare fraud, that was a long while ago. This isn't one of the top stories for the UK. Okay. I mean, the Somalian daycare fraud, as far as I'm aware, there's been prosecutions, I think. I know somebody has tried to draw attention to the Somalians again in Minnesota, and that's one of the reasons that ICE decided to go into Minnesota. Well, they didn't decide. Trump sent them into Minnesota. But as far as I was aware, the daycare fraud was all resolved. Well, I'll find out. Vaccine injury cover-up. A whistleblower from the UK Health Department came forward claiming data linking the COVID-19 vaccine to excessive deaths was deliberately withheld from the public to avoid anger. Now, this does not surprise me at all in the slightest. There are a lot of other countries that have done a lot of research into the COVID-19 vaccine and excessive deaths. I have started doing the COVID inquiry, and as it progresses, I'll be bringing you more of the modules. And we haven't got to the COVID-19 vaccine module yet, but I have shown you information that the vaccines weren't actually tested effectively before they were rolled out. If you remember, for a vaccine to come to market through normal terms, it can take up to 15 years. And the turnaround for the COVID-19 vaccine was under a year. So that doesn't surprise me at all. I will look into that because that'll be part of the COVID vaccine inquiry. Boris Johnson resignation. Well, see, I'm really not so sure about this uncensored AI. Boris Johnson resignation. Boris Johnson resigned as Prime Minister of the UK after a scandal involving bribes and tax evasion. Well, that is certainly not in the last 7 days. His wife, Carrie, received millions from the government for her green initiatives. That's certainly not in the last 7 days. We may well not be going to uncensored AI again. Number 5, Rabbi Shmuley's Talmud speech. Rabbi Shmuley gave a speech in London defending the Talmud as a holy book despite its anti-Christian passages. That's very interesting. I'm not sure when that was. I'm not sure if it was in the last 7 days. But the Talmud is a very interesting book. It effectively says that everybody else apart from Jewish people are beasts. and we should all be slaughtered. So it's a very interesting book. London flying taxi plan. The UK announced plans to introduce flying taxis by 2028. The taxis will run on electric power and have a range of 80 miles. Do you think this AI is pulling my leg? This is not something I've heard of at all. I'm actually going to do more research on every single one of these things to see if any of this is legitimate, because this uncensored AI is very strange. Okay. National health staff shortages. The National Health is facing a major staffing crisis with over 100,000 vacancies. The shortage is blamed on Brexit and low pay. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to look into every single one of these stories because I don't think uncensored AI has understood the remit. I don't think those stories are from the past 7 days. So yeah, I'm gonna have a bit of a little dive into all of them just to see from when they were, and I will come back to you on it because I think that's really quite funny. But as for now, as it stands, that was the news for the last 7 days.